Welcome back to From the BOLN, the Burnley podcast. I'm your host, Simon Evans, and with me today, as always, former Burnley Express legend Chris Bowden and multimedia maestro and ex-Lancashire Telegraph columnist Andrew Greaves. How are we doing, gents?
I'm laughing at that. Leg end, baby.
What a welcome that was.
There you go. So anyway, international break. Premier League is back this weekend, thankfully. I think a lot of us feel thankfully. But how was your international break? Did you take in much of the international football, Greavesy?
No, I mean, I have a real dislike of international football outside of major tournaments, I have to say. It just, it bores me. I'll be honest, I forgot England were playing Ukraine whenever they played the Ukraine, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. I just forgot they were playing. I watched the Scotland game, to be fair. But yeah, I just long for the domestic competitions to start again. It just feels like just a waste for me because I'm not one of these who watches multiple games during international break. I have mates who do, but no, I don't enjoy it. It always comes at the wrong time, and yeah, not for me.
It does feel a bad time, doesn't it? Because it's so early in the season, not just in England, but in Europe in general. The leagues have just got going. Your interest levels are being built. The little narratives and stories are starting, and then you stop for a fortnight. Chris, did you watch much?
I said I went to watch Oldham on Saturday. And that was a pretty awful game all round against Dorking, nil apiece draw, and Unzi's under a bit of pressure there. But I come out there into the bar and watched the first half of the Ukraine game. Caught the equaliser and obviously tuned in to watch. What was an enjoyable training session at Hampden. Men against boys, attack versus defence. It was decent. That. Yeah, considering Scotland were the form side in Europe, I think they've gone 6 games unbeaten and slapped them down a peg or two. And they've got a long way to go before they're anywhere near in England's league. Trying to flip the pressure now and suggest that England, this group of players, should be winning a tournament, but we all know it's not as cut and dried as that. And when it comes down to tournament football, but I think just looking at the lad Bellingham, he just really, really excites me, and I'd quite happily sit and watch him play all night. I'm not too fussed about the gap. It's football's football. give me more.
Bellingham is the one reason to watch England. I mean, he's just, I don't know. I mean, you run out of superlatives for him, don't you? I mean, the start he's made in La Liga has been fantastic, and he is genuinely world class. Despite what the caller to Talk Sport said, I don't know if you guys saw that just before. It said we've got Scotland in Billy Gilmore have got the in-form best midfielder in Europe. He's better at what he does than what Jude Bellingham does. And Darren Bent and Andy Goldstein were just like, sorry, can you just repeat that? That is ridiculous. But yeah, Bellingham is just he's just phenomenal. Love watching him. Seems a nice kid as well. Seems a really nice kid.
Yeah. He was so close to signing for Manchester United as well. And there's some people at that club must be absolutely looking in the mirror every morning when they read about what he's doing at Real Madrid. But I must admit the international breaks when I was back in England and like covering Premier League, I used to quite enjoy going on Stanley. I just used to have a little break from the Premier League and just sort of reconnect with the kind of football that we watched in our 4th division days. But these days over here, it was South American World Cup qualifiers for me, which was really enjoyable. Actually, it's been a while since I've sort of tuned in and really paid attention to that. Argentina played some cracking. I mean, even without Messi in Bolivia, they still look such a good side. They really do. But you get massive crowds, and it matters. Even though it's like World Cup qualifiers, and how far away is 2026? It feels ridiculous. And nearly everyone's qualifying under the expanded 48-team World Cup. But there's such a tradition to those games that like everyone's up for them. All the grounds were full, big crowds, really passionate. It was really enjoyable to watch it. So that was my little international break, which is a bit different when you're over here and you know, your day-to-day is Major League Soccer, and then you get a bit of that. So, yeah, Premier League back, though. Let's get into that shortly. But before we do, there were a couple of Clarets had notable international breaks. Lyle Foster, the goal machine, on target again for South Africa in their 1-0 win over the Democratic Republic of Congo. Found a video, having gone through about 6 or 7 fake attempts on YouTube, where you just get some graphic and some bloke mumbling in an African dialect about the game, and I just wanted to see the goal. But Twitter's a better bet for things like that. Pounced on a loose ball in the box, drove it home with his left foot, and as the commentator said, Lyle Foster, just as he does for Burnley, grants no mercy.
Nice. It's good. It's only good for a minute. Yeah.
His goal celebration was quite straight. Yeah, it was quite the goal celebration.
He runs in a straight line. It is like you say, Chris. I mean, it's brilliant for him. I mean, his confidence must be sky high, because I think he strikes me as being a bit of a confidence player. I know he talked about his mental health struggles, I think, in the summer on a South African radio interview, and I think, you know, Company showed that faith, didn't he? I mean, in the documentary, he's being questioned by the board, like, oh, Lyle Foster's not playing very much, and he said, look, we've brought him in because we can get him now for this price, and he's built for the Premier League. And you know, 2 in 2 before he went on international duty, 1 in 1. I think South Africa only had 1 game. I think he's only played 1 game. Scored again, so hopefully he'll come back on Monday night and, you know, find return to his goal scoring in a claret and blue shirt or whatever, whichever of the 3 shirts we're going to wear in Nottingham on Monday.
He is the big positive of the season so far, isn't he, Chris? I mean, we were all, you know, talking for weeks about we need a centre forward, and he's stepped up, as they say over here.
Yeah, there were just those promising signs in pre-season, and obviously, you know, he opening night, he was, you know, one of the main plus points. His his work rate. You know, he's willing to. He's a pest. So Owen Cole used to describe Martin Patterson as a pest. He's that same type. He's forever like trying to rat the ball away from centre halves and fullbacks, and when you throw goals on top of that, now that he's starting to find the net, the foresight that Company had to pick him up in January. He's had that luxury of being able to sort of ease him in. So a lot of Burnley fans were sort of wondering, what quite does Vincent see in him? And we've seen that sort of that graft, and now like I say, plus goals. Koleosho, there's that nice little statistic. He's top player in the Premier League in terms of winning the ball back in the opponent's defensive third and things like that. There are little things that are working, but obviously a lot to do against the ball.
And our fullback, Connor Roberts, won his 50th cap for Wales against Latvia. So that puts him, he's in contention to become the most capped Welsh international to have played for Burnley. Obviously not all the caps while playing for Burnley, but he's on 50 now. Leighton James 54, Sam Vokes 64, and Brian Flynn 66. Greavsey, he's a player who clearly really relishes playing for Wales. Very proud of it. Sings the songs, really into it. And I think for somebody who had a relatively modest start to his career with those loan spells from Swansea and so on, he's done really well, hasn't he?
He has, and I think you often get that with Welsh players, don't you? I mean, Vokesy on 64, did you say there? I mean, Vokesy was a bit of a kind of travelling man, weren't he, until he came to Burnley and kind of really started to settle. But, let's be honest, the Welsh manager perhaps doesn't have the same pool of talent to choose from. But when they do get a player in a position, then that player really kind of relishes playing for Wales. It's part of their identity, which I always love about the Welsh national team. And not being too kind of discrediting towards Scotland, the Republic and Northern Ireland. Most of the Welsh players do tend to be Welsh born, don't they? I mean, I think there was a stat about Steve Clarke's side in terms of the amount that played in the Premier League and the amount that he's used that weren't Scottish born, if you will. You don't tend to get that so much with the Welsh, do you? I mean, the Welsh do tend to be born within Wales, and I think Connor's, it's magnificent to get to 50 caps. If you've had a not modest career, you look at the kind of list of England players who've played for top clubs and never got to 50 caps. To have that consistency for your national side, you've got to take your hat off to him, and he's clearly cemented that place. And we were talking before we came on, probably got at least the Euros in him, if not another tournament after that. So you can see that Brian Flynn record perhaps being in danger, given the amount of international games that kind of tot up over the course of a season as well.
Yeah, I mean, I went down and saw Wales play Ukraine in the World Cup qualifier last year, and spoke to a few Wales fans about Connor Roberts. And the thing that struck me was, although he's very clearly identified with Swansea, there was, even some of the Cardiff fans, they have a lot of time for him because, just because he belts out the songs, not just an national anthem, but the other song that they sing before games these days, that's quite a sort of nationalist sort of tub thumping song and everything. And he loves it. He's really into it. And he's I mean, as a player, when he came in, people weren't excited about him as a signing for Burnley, really, were they? But he's survived from the Dyche era, when a lot of people haven't done, hasn't he? He's been a sort of, that's been one constant in this period of change, has been right back until he started playing at left back, obviously.
I said he must have wondered what he'd come to really when he signed. He was struck. He had the serious illness and injury and what have you, and and then playing a brand of football that would have been somewhat alien to him. The Sean Dyche's brand of football, and obviously scored that fabulous goal against it was Southampton, wasn't it, where he cut in on his left foot and found the top corner and ended the season fairly decently, to be fair. But when you've grown up in that, the sort of the football that Swansea produced over the last decade, and the DNA that they've got going all the way back to your Martinez's and Laudrups and all that. He's been a part of that and come all the way through, and he knows. Company's football must be like a dream for him to be that a part of that side. But I was thinking about these Welsh players, Greavsey, all born in Wales, like Volksy and Gaz Taylor.
Well, yeah, I realise that there is exception to the rule there, but yeah, I was going Ian Rush, Mark Hughes, Ryan Giggs, of course, famously not born in Wales either and played for England from 21. But I think, perhaps I was being a little bit cheeky towards kind of Scotland and Ireland. But of course, Connor won't have to wait very long for his next international cap, because we've only got about 4 weeks until the next international break at the start of October, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think there was some.
And one in November, yeah.
I do think there was some value in. It all got mixed up when Wenger was talking about changing the Windows system. He got caught up with his idea of 2 World Cups. Every World Cup every 2 years, sorry. But it did have this idea of just having 2 mega breaks, one in the autumn, one in the spring, early spring, and just, playing 4 games rather than 2, and just saying, right, that's your window, and the rest of the time is domestic football. And I think there's a good case for that, because it's going to it just loses the rhythm and momentum, doesn't it, of domestic seasons. Anyway, let's just a quote from.
I was saying this before. Well, sorry, I mean, even before the season, season hadn't even ended, and Michael Obafemi got hurt, with the Republic of Ireland, and he's still out for Burnley. And I think a player that Burnley fans would be interested to see his sort of his impact, but we're waiting on him yet.
Yeah. Right, Vincent Company was talking this week, and there was an interesting quote that I wanted to throw over for comment. He said, "We can either struggle for the next 10 years, or we can use this season to maybe struggle for one season, but then make a leap forward soon after. This is the kind of squad we have, one that can progress for a number of years. It's 1 year where it's not going to be any different than any of the other teams that have just come up. But whatever way we shape the squad, it would have been the same. The first year is always a difficult year, but looking past this year and looking at a cycle of 3 years, this team has got some real potential, and that's exciting." I'm not quite sure what he's saying at the start of that there with we can struggle for the next 10 years, or we can use this season to struggle for 1 year and then make a leap forward. Am I overthinking this, Greavsey? What's he saying there?
I think what he's saying is that you could have, and I'm not saying this is a slight on Sean Dyche, but you could set your stall out to kind of buy those players that have no room for development, those players that perhaps don't have a market value, don't fit into that system which we're going to have of, hopefully buy cheap, sell high, i.e. more of what we did. Because let's be honest, kind of, the most amount of seasons under Sean, he was performing miracles, so it was a struggle for Sean. We were fighting against relegation, etc., etc. So you could go down that path where you pick up your Eric Peters, your Phil Bardsleys, your aging pros, which, every year you're going to be in that battle to kind of the mini league at the bottom. You want to finish, third bottom, fourth bottom even. You don't want to finish third bottom. Or what you can do is you can set your stall out. You can buy these players cheap relatively. And I know as the window went on, we started to splash a bit more cash and use it as a transition season, perhaps like the Germans did. If you remember, the Germans pretty much wrote off to a World Cup and European Championships to blood in the new talent, and I feel that's probably something that would have benefited England a good few years ago, to get rid of some of that old guard and bring through the newer players almost en masse and write off a couple of campaigns. I think that's what Company's saying. I think part of it is tempering expectations, because I think we were all I know I certainly was a little bit guilty of thinking that we were going to take our championship form straight into the Premier League and there'd be no stopping us. I got a little bit overexcited, I have to say. So I think what he's saying is look, let's temper expectations. We are just another promoter club. Yes, we've signed all these incredible players, but to expect them to turn into a top 10, top 7 side this season is probably way beyond our possibility. Now, I that's how I read it. When I read it, I kind of thought, look, it's quite sensible. I think in his team meetings, he'll be talking a completely different game and not setting expectations. But I think for us, it's an expectation setter. But also, again, I think it feeds into the fact that he sees this as a long-term project. He sees it as that, I'm still going to be here next season. And next season, if this team develops and transitions as we expect it to do, then it'll be second season Brentford, second season Brighton, where you get rid of the shackles of being that promoted club. You gain the experience of mixing it with the big boys. You look at where you need to fill in gaps. Spoiler alert, left back definitely. And you then push on next season wanting to give a good show of yourself. It's not to say we won't do that this season once we start hitting the ground. And I still don't think we'll be fourth bottom. I do think we'll finish higher than that. But that was my reading of it. But it was an interesting quote. Interesting for Vincent, who's never really come out with anything like that, to come out with that kind of, pragmatic kind of approach.
Maybe struggle for one season. I mean, as a journalist, your ears would prick up to that bit, wouldn't they, Chris?
Oh, certainly. But I think Burnley fans know the drill, don't they? You go up in 2009 and struggled, got relegated. Go up in 2014, struggled, relegated. Go up in 2016, cracked it, And that was the major breakthrough. Remember sort of winning it. The only away win of the season at Palace at the end of that season, which basically secured safety. And I've spoke about it before. It's for a lot of these players. Like I say, certainly the players that Vincent's brought in this summer, they haven't experienced the hype that goes into every game, and it is every game, whether you're playing Brentford, Bournemouth, or Manchester City or Manchester United. The hype's the same for every game. The level of press interest, the level of interviews you have to do, every ground's full. The scrutiny on every kick of the ball, every decision. It's a lot to get your head around, and it is a struggle. And throw in the fact that they're quite inexperienced players in the main as well, playing at this level for the first time. If you do crack it, next season, you're expecting takeoff, aren't you? Really, say the potential of some of these players is through the roof. I just really, really heartened by what Brian Jensen was saying last week. Believing in the process and believing in these players, and they've been brought in for that specific profile, and you can see, like I said, given a season, given that's a survival season, I think it could be, like I say, the turbocharge things moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, he does say later in that interview about needing to toughen up the defence, which is obvious. But it is interesting, and it's interesting that he talks about struggling for a season, because there'd been no talk about that at all, had there, before the season, that we're going to struggle this year in the top flight. But I think he's addressing some concerns that obviously he'll have picked up from the fans and the general chatter and punditry some of it's been writing Burnley off already, hasn't it? I mean, we were quite critical, and it was interesting to hear the Beast's thoughts on it last week. If you haven't listened, that was last week's podcast. Special guest Brian Jensen, but he was sort of not putting us in our place, but he did sort of, after we did a very critical episode after the Spurs game, to have an ex-pro come on and say, come on, this is a really tough job, and you've got a brilliant manager, believe in him. And I think most Burnley fans, when things settled down after that Spurs game, still believe in Vincent Kompany, but obviously a lot of improvement needs to be done, starting on Monday at Nottingham Forest. The other thing that happened this week, the list of the Premier League squad had to be put in, the official list, 25 players. The only absentee from sort of senior players on that is Darko Chulinov, who's still working his way back to health and fitness. The weird thing with it is, of course, there's 56 under-21 players also registered for the Premier League. So Burnley have a total squad size of 81 players, which of course isn't the first team squad really, but 81 players. So just to think about it, I mean, you think back to when we used to have an A team and a B team and a reserve team, all playing every Saturday, and we wouldn't have had half of that amount. Well, about half that amount, probably. I mean, one or two subs for each team in those days, of course. But that number just I found that incredible to think we had that many footballers, Chris.
Yeah, but I bear in mind that we're in an age where, like clubs like Chelsea have had 40 odd players out on loan. Clubs are stockpiling players, aren't they now? And if you're in Burnley, have never been in that position where they can do something like that. Like Greavsey said, they've gone out and signed experienced pros that'll do them a job for a season or two. But being able to bring in, let's say the young kid that's coming from St Mirren, and it'd be nice to see some of these development players make an impact as well. Maybe couple out on loan. The Owen Dodgson gone out to Barnsley and so on. But let's say so much youth. That's you look at the under-21 players. That they're first team players. Alda Kill, Egan Riley's not had much of a kick, but senior pro, Collie Osho, Odebear's been involved, Ramsey will certainly be involved, James Trafford. It is exciting on paper, but you can see, like I say, obviously Cherlinoff's had the the illness, etc. But he's probably not going to be up to speed until January. And like I say, Samuel Bastian maybe was one of those that maybe could have missed the cut. But I say he's still got that. The Rodriguez's, the Taylors.
It's a big squad, isn't it?
Yeah,
I don't think we've ever had. We've never had that amount of players to choose from. I mean,
the depth is crazy. Yeah.
Murray Campbell is the player that's coming from St Mirren, 17 years old, getting rave reports, was out of contract, I believe. So that's how it sort of went through under the radar after the window, that deal, I think. Greavesy, I mean, what did you think when you saw that list of names, apart from being able to have a little chuckle at some of the middle names there? But it's quite a list, isn't it?
It is, and I was saying this when on the Spurs game to the lads I'm sat with. If you think about which players didn't make that Spurs squad, you've got Ekdal out injured at that point. You've got Ramsey not in that squad. You had Taylor not in that squad. I don't think Odegaard were in the squad. You had Zarori suspended. When you look at that kind of match day 19 or whatever it is, you can't fit all these players in. I mean, you can't fit all of the new signings plus the ones we need from last season with Muric as the sub goalkeeper. So you're always no Bastian, of course, has not had a look in this season as well. You've got a lot of players there. I mean, the squads last season. You think back to some of the times under Dyche, and I noticed he did it again the other day for Everton. 2 goalkeepers on the bench. Youth team kind of graduates who are never going to get on.
Yeah, we had that a lot, didn't we?
We've suddenly gone from that, like you say, the old AB reserve team days aside, you've gone under Dyche where you've got very few first team senior players missing out on a place in that squad because we basically had a senior first team supplemented when injured by youngsters who were never really going to get more than 5 minutes. To now having conceivably a matchday squad which will leave out players who could feasibly get in championship teams. Scotty Twine's out on loan, of course. Obafemi's injured. All of these players, how do you get all of that into 19 or whatever it is for the matchday squad? So the exciting thing, like Chris said, a lot of young players, a lot of first team regulars who are on that under 21 list, and a couple more who are just slightly older. So Bayer, of course, but also the fact that we are kind of stockpiling players to a degree where if one leaves, let's say Zarori has a cracking start when he gets his season properly underway and Liverpool come in with 40 million, you can't turn that down in January. You just kind of go, well, that's fine. Odegaard will step in. It's not that kind of, right, what do we do? We've got nobody. We're going to have to go out and buy somebody. I think some of the summer business is probably done with January being a terrible time to buy players. By and large, if you're a Premier League club, we got away with it in the Championship, but I think it's a terrible time, and that's why you like Sir Alex and Arsene Wenger and those kind of managers never bought in January because it's a seller's market, because clubs are desperate to push on for Champions League or avoid relegation, and the prices just go through the roof. And we learned from Matt Williams that there were players who would just Teller was just outside the price range. Maatson, we couldn't do the deal early in the window because it was too much, and when it came to within the price we wanted, the player had decided not to turn up. So I think it's a sensible move, and it becomes more and more sensible, apart from the neglecting to get a left back, the more you think about what company wants to work with and how he wants to work with it. Egan Riley looked to be in the training pictures, so it looks like he's back from that long-term injury or medium-term injury. Cherlinoff back training, but they clearly think that he's going to take longer than Obafemi, because I've not seen Obafemi in any training pictures. We can re-register the squad in January, so we might see Cherlinoff make a return in January. We might see him shipped out on loan or a permanent come January once he's back fully fit. I don't know, but I'm just not sure I'd want to be Vincent Kompany with that amount of talent and trying to choose A, a starting 11, and B, a wider 19 matchday squad.
Yeah, and it's also, with that amount of players, just on the youth side, there's an awful lot of planning and organisation got to go into it. If you are going to have development pathways, to use the phrase that they like to talk about, for all those players, to give them enough game time and opportunities and personal attention on the training ground, when you've got so many of them, it's going to be a busy time at Gawthorpe, I think, over the next year or two. But I agree with you. I think we're probably going to have to be realistic as well in future windows, where if we do sell a Zarori, and there'll be that clamour, well, we need to replace Zarori, and like you say, there's a player there like Odebert who might come straight into that position, or Koleosho, despite making a positive start, I think probably when everybody's up and running, he's probably not going to be a starter. You would think that players like Brun Larsen with Bundesliga experience under their belt are probably going to be a bit ahead of him in the pecking order, but we'll see. He's taking his chance quite well. But we might not need to go out and spend a lot of money next summer because we've done so much work to put the next wave of players in there. So it's an interesting one. But more immediate concerns is Monday's match at the City Ground. It's a big one, isn't it? You were saying, Chris, like every game has its own hype and its own pressure, but this is and it's ridiculous this stage in the season to talk about must wins or can't afford to lose. Of course, there's a long, long way to go, but the season does need the ship does need steering in a different direction, doesn't it?
It does, and like I say, I don't like the must win phrase. Must wins when you come to the last game of the season and you have to win to do whatever you need to. But if you lose at the City Ground on Monday night, you're 9 points behind a team that you would consider to be in and around you, you'd imagine. And that's it's a big hurdle. Forest have they've won 2 and lost 2. I mean, that was a turn up for the Bucks last time out, but or maybe not winning 1-0 at Chelsea. They were obviously 2-0 up at Old Trafford the week before as well. So but I still imagine Forest will be in and around Burnley. Is the League Cup game a marker? Both were entirely different sides to what will be put out on Monday night, you'd imagine. But
I don't think we can read too much into that one.
No, you've got to be looking to sort of pick up a point there. At fingers crossed. Repeat that League Cup victory. But just you can't be losing that at this stage of the season.
Greavesy, we talked a lot in that post-Tottenham podcast about what we would do and what Vincent Kompany should do to sort things out. But what do you think he actually will do in terms of team selection, adjusting things?
I don't think there'll be much adjusting, if I'm really honest, because I think he genuinely believes that the way he sets up will be the right way. And I think, I do look to last season when we didn't have the best start and we were trying things time and time again and it wasn't coming off. We were conceding goals, we were getting ahead but then conceding. We were conceding late in matches to throw away points and everyone went, this isn't working. But I always think back to that, the bit of the documentary where he talks about 100 training sessions, 120 meetings and things will start to tick. And I think he probably has this viewpoint that the left-back situation is not ideal. I think the fact that he plays Roberts there is almost an admission that it's not really working. For whatever reason, we've done it to death, but he don't fancy Charlie Taylor. You think that might, if he's been working with the players in the international break, he might look at Taylor as a potential option against the Forest, but I don't think he'll tweak much. To be fair, I think we'll still go with that Amdouni, Koleosho, Foster front three, with perhaps a Burge and a Berger and a Cullen behind that. I don't know. I don't see him being the tinker man. I think he has genuine belief that these players and that system will come good, and it's just a case of when. And once it does, then that'll be launch. That'll be the launch pad that we need to kind of kick on.
He's got to have been concerned about the defence, though. Especially after that Spurs game. He's got to have been looking at something on the training ground in the last 2 weeks to improve that.
Yeah, but I think it is just that toughening up. He mentioned in that interview, toughening up the defence. I think we had the same issue when we got spanked by Sheffield United. We had the exact same issue. The defence wasn't tough enough. We were getting beat by high balls into the box at set pieces. It's a slightly different issue this time. We're pushing too far up, and we're leaving ourselves open for players like Son to get in behind, as he did a couple of times, and we're not being disciplined enough. But all of that is kind of fairly basic stuff. The way O'Shea moves towards the ball and leaves Son for the first goal is kind of unacceptable for a defender at any level, let alone Premier League level. And he will know that. They will have analysed that in team meetings. The way we're trying to kind of be too cute coming out from the back and not mixing it up. And you might remember last season, Muric went through a spell where he was just short ball all the time and it wasn't working. Then he started picking longer balls and it started easing that pressure as and when. It didn't mean that we were completely abandoning playing out from the back. So I think there's a pragmatism to Company. I think there's a steel. I think there's a determination that his system will come good, but it'll be more the way we play, I think, rather than personnel changes. And I don't think it'll be wholesale changes to the way we play, but it might be a word in Trafford's ear to say, look, don't be afraid of pumping it long, saying to his defenders, look, I think working on distribution for O'Shea is a key thing, because his distribution is nowhere near the level of Harwood Bellis, Ekdal, Bayer, for instance. So I think there'll be tweaks to individual training plans more than wholesale issues. I'd suspect. I don't know, but I guess we'll find out on Monday.
Yeah, we are away from home as well, which I do wonder if we might not see, if not a total change to the system, but maybe something like Goodmanson playing in one of those wide positions so that he can help out in the centre of midfield a little bit. Chris, what are your feelings? Do you think he'll adjust things a bit?
I'd like to think he'll go with that third central midfielder, just shore that up a little bit. Brownhill's probably your number one candidate to fulfil that. With Zarori's back. His band's up, so he can play. Does he bounce straight back into the equation? Didn't start against Manchester City, obviously, and it may well be.
Which was a surprise he didn't start against City.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I say, I mean, nobody who follows Burnley on this planet would have expected Koleosho to start, surely. Yeah. It was just a bolt from the blue, that wasn't it? But it's maybe Zoro's going to force himself into the picture from the bench. Benson may be similar. I say he may shore up those wider areas with a Goodmanson who can work up against the ball as well as with it. But like Greavsey said, simple things, isn't it? If there's you said Burnley are doing so well at winning the ball high up the pitch, but the amount of occasions against Tottenham where there's no pressure on the ball. Well, why are we still so high up the pitch? You've got to. If there's no pressure on the ball, you've got to drop. And the first goal in particular, it's just a punt over the top, and you're getting caught out by that. It's just shouldn't happen. And
the Son hat-trick goals. It's very similar. It's the curved ball around the back for the Son hat-trick goal.
It's a delightful ball to give.
It's a brilliant ball.
But you say you shouldn't be.
But you're getting two defenders facing their own goal and running back to their own goal. You want to be facing. If you're 10, 15 yards further back, you're not playing as high a line. You're constantly facing the ball, and there's no space for that ball in behind. And it's easy for me to be sat here saying that. But it's them little bits in the Premier League don't leave a big gap for a player like Son to run into. And there were other issues with Alder Keel being asked to play right back and then right wing back, which didn't really work. But I genuinely think that, like we said, it's little bits. That's all it is. It's little bits, individual errors, cutting out individual errors, upping individual concentration. We talked about Trafford for one of the Villa goals. His starting position could have been better, and if his starting position's better, he perhaps gets to the ball before Watkins does to get it across to Matty Cash. We don't concede early. The game plays out a different way. There's all these little bits. It's like sliding doors moments sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we'll learn a lot. I think we'll learn a lot from what team he puts out and from how we approach this game and how it goes. I think this is a game where, it's still a tough one, isn't it? But, they are a team who you'd expect to be in that bottom third of the league. And you've got to be looking to try and at least draw games like that on the road. I think, when you look at getting to that 40-point mark or something around that, you've got to be looking at games like that as being potential points and winning the odd one. So I think we'll learn a lot about Kompany as he found a solution to his fullback problem. Do we see, Delquois start at left back and Connor Roberts at right back, which if Delquois can play at left back, seems to me, and he's not going to play Charlie Taylor, seems to me an obvious move to make rather than losing Aldakiel's influence from the middle as well. So we'll learn a lot.
There was a suggestion, yeah. There was a suggestion Reguilon was, he's ended up at Manchester United, hasn't he? That he was one that was offered, and whether Vincent just wasn't keen, the age profile, or beggars can't be choosers sometimes, can they? I'd rather have, like, if we're not going to play Taylor, I'd rather have a left back than an auxiliary one. So just does not. Let's say Roberts can do a job there. Yeah, fine, he's doing a job. Vitinho can do a job there. Yeah, but it's square pegs in round holes, isn't it?
Yeah. So we'll see if he's found some magical solution that we haven't thought of as well in the training ground. Who knows? Maybe CJ Egan-Riley's been absolutely in storming form at Gawthorpe, and we have no idea about it. But let's see. He does pull the odd surprise on you, does Vincent? So we will see. Right, before we wrap up, Greavsey, you were reminded today of a professional and footballing anniversary. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I was checking my kind of Facebook memories, and there was a post that I put on Facebook back in 2009, which said that I'd upset a Premier League manager today, and I thought back and I realised that it was the anniversary of the time that Owen Coyle, a very angry Owen Coyle, rang me up first thing on a Monday morning, having picked up the Lancashire Telegraph to be confronted with this failed five-a-side footballer, suggesting that playing Graham Alexander at Liverpool was the main issue and the reason we got beat, and Yessi Ben Ayoun scored a hat-trick. And it was quite almost a kind of slapstick turn of events, because I was doing my day job, which was a political correspondent for the Bolton News, and I was actually speaking to a counsellor, and I had a missed call from Darren Bentley, who was the then press officer at Burnley, which I rejected because I was on the other line, and then a call from a number I didn't recognise, which I also rejected. And I put the phone down to counsellor, rang back the second number first, amazingly, and it was Owen Coyle. And he went straight off the gun. And it always sits with me. I always remember Coyle saying to me, if I'm rubbish at Scottish accents, he'll have to apologise. I'll have to apologise. He says, if I was Graham Alexander, I'd hunt you down, pal. And I wish I'd have been quick enough to think to myself and say at the point that I thought afterwards, Graham Alexander at that point was probably the only first-team footballer at Burnley that I could beat over 100 metres. And that's no disrespect to Graham, but yeah, and Daz, I think, was ringing me to say don't answer your phone because Coyle's on the warpath. I did get sweet revenge on a couple of occasions afterwards, because when he moved to Bolton, Chris will remember this, we have a thing called Local Newspaper Week, and Owen Coyle was the guest editor, and I said to the editor's secretary, look, when Coyley's here, let me know and I'll meet him on the stairs as he's being brought up. And he did the really awkward, oh, hello, Andrew. Oh, really nice to see you. Very, very kind of shameful. Like, and true to form, Coyle left midway through the day. So my quip in the afternoon conference of always leaves a job half done didn't go down that well with the team of Bolton. Sub-editors and editors. But I was also in the front row of the press conference when Bolton got smashed in the FA Cup semi-final, and he was the first face. I was the first face he saw when he came in after they'd been beaten 5-0 or whatever it was, because I was there doing the colour stuff for the Bolton News as well. So I do always wonder what happened to Mr. Coyle, because
we need
our
to get
paths
him on
have
the
gone
podcast. I've
very
been
separate
this.
ways.
We
but he's
need to
back
get
in
him on,
India.
but I think I might have to do it on my own. I think it's.
Yeah, the suggestion did not go down well in the WhatsApp group, did it? But listen,
I'd be interested to get the feedback from our listeners whether they would be interested in an Owen Coyle special, because we do have ways to get in touch with him, and I've spoken to him a couple of times since he's left the club. I interviewed him when he was at Houston Dynamo over here. And I reckon we could get him on the show, but and I don't want to make it a whole. I wouldn't want to make it a whole sort of, Judas, where a Bolton now sort of discussion. But would people be interested? I think they would.
I would say, what I would say about Coyle is he gave us, I think, until we started being Premier League regulars, which sounds ridiculous to say, he gave us that incredible season. You cannot doubt that. That promotion season, semi-final of the League Cup, that night at Turf Moor where we almost overturned, we did overturn the 4-1 first leg defeat to Spurs, and then went out on that stupid rule that away goals, I think, only counted as double after extra time in the League Cup, and it was only cup competition where league away goals counted double. But listen, I think, I've mellowed towards Coyle over the years, and I think back to that promotion season, that trip to Wembley, semi-final of the League Cup. I don't think you can hold too much malice against him, purely just based on that one season that he gave us, which was just incredible.
Well, it was interesting to listen to what the Beast had to say about it last week, and to be honest, I reckon if you spoke to most players who played under him at that time, you'd get similar comments. People who worked on his coaching staff I've spoken to as well, and they all have good things to say about him. I'd love to get him on, and I think I would. If let us know on social media if you're listening to this whether you'd be interested in an Owen Coyle special, because I think it'd be good to just whether he'd want to do a completely let's talk about you leaving Burnley and what went on, whether he'd want to do that or just brush it over and talk about lots of other things. I don't know, but that would be what we'd have to talk about, I think. Chris, would you be interested in doing an interview with Owen Coyle?
I say we did something in the Burnley Express for the 10th anniversary of the win at Wembley, but I did let my colleague Dan do that one because I just ducked out. It's obviously nowhere near as raw as it was at the time, but that was the real shame, about Wembley. You've won promotion to the Premier League, which people of our era never dreamt would ever happen.
No.
We've watched Burnley losing, every time we went to Maidstone and Aldershot and Gillingham, we got beat 3-0 in the 4th division. And until the title season, things started to turn in the right direction. But, it really hurt. It really hurt. But that night, all the rumours were about Celtic, and that sort of rained on Burnley's parade, really. And
Brian said last week that they were talking about that as well, weren't they? It wasn't just fan speculation.
But I do remember sort of talking to him, and whenever he spoke about Jay Rodriguez or Eagles or someone like that, and just sort of saying that we're trying to put something together here, and I really hope players don't go at the drop of a hat. And then I said to him at Bolton, I said, well, I think I'd asked him about the Celtic interest, and he'd said, no, there was never a decision to make. And then obviously, I think you look back, and there obviously was a decision to make. He stayed at Burnley. So at Bolton, I said, well, you always said you didn't want your players to go at the drop of a hat, and he said, well, left at the drop of a hat to go to Bolton. I could have gone to Celtic. I said, well, 6 months ago, you were telling me there was no decision to make on. It was just a lot of, a lot of stuff that was a bit woolly, shall we say, at the time. And
but in terms of what Greavsey was talking about there, about his experience of getting an angry phone call, you had 28 years as Burnley reporter for the Burnley Express. How many times did you get a phone call like that from a Burnley manager?
Well, the best thing about working at the Burnley Express, and it was pointed out to me at the interview by Edward Lee and Chris Daggett, who was the editor, said you get Fridays off. I thought, this is great, this. But I can remember many a Friday when Stan was in charge and you're preparing to do whatever with your day off. And at 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, phone goes and it's Turf Moor or Gawthorpe. And it's his PA, Ange. I've got Stan for you. And your heart would sink. He's like, what on earth have I done now? Because you knew it wasn't to say thank you for something or praise you for an article. Although we did thank me after the promotion at Scunthorpe. But no, invariably you'd upset him with it could even be a word you'd written. It could be a paragraph. It could be a link to a player. More often than not, it was transfer speculation. I remember doing a story. I spoke to a reporter down at the Bristol Evening Post, and he said, Burnley are after centre forward at Bristol City. I forget his name now. He was a big lad, 6'4". But the day after Burnley played Bristol City at Turf Moor, and both Stan and Tony Pulis, who was Bristol City manager at the time, both sort of stirred me out in the press conference and were just furious at me for this story that had gone in the Bristol Post as well. But he seemed to get away scot-free. Yeah, it was. But he was. Like I say, he was good as gold. Stan. I had utmost respect for him. But yeah, sometimes.
Steve Cottrell, did Cottrell ever get on the blow?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Why have you written this and why have you done that? And he'd. To be fair, more often than not, wouldn't ring you. He'd pull you to one side in a press conference after a press conference, and he was always curious to know why. You'd written something, maybe even just an opinion. If you remember the 19-game run without a win, which was really hard, really tough going, painful, and there was a defeat towards the end of that run at Southend on a Tuesday night where Wade Elliott was playing right back, and I think I'd stated some opinion, and he just like, why have you written that? Why, do you not believe that we're going to get out of this? And I just, you've just got to stick up for your own opinions. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's an opinion. It doesn't. You're not setting the agenda. It's just what you pay to. A lot of people seem to think that well, obviously I've seen myself being mentioned in that tone of towing the party line, and it's not the case. If we've written something, it's 99.9% of it. It's going to be your opinion most of the time. It's you're not just and one of the first interviews I had in the job is saying you cannot be afraid of upsetting football managers. And I fell out with every football manager I dealt with. Probably, even to an extent, Eddie Howe on occasion. Shone was good as gold, that he understood that we had a job to do and didn't take things personally at all. But no, I was in some way, shape or form banned by every Burnley manager, be that from press conferences.
What was he with Eddie? Yeah. What was he with Eddie?
I could, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I'd written something and he took umbrage at it. But I say Brian Law.
Sorry, go on, Brian Laws.
No, I say Brian Laws sort of banned us from press conferences at one stage towards the end of that season in the his half season in the Premier League and things like that. But it was. from the first manager I worked with, Jimmy Mullen, who are you trying to pick my team for me, and getting really upset with us, and because I was a big champion of John Mullen back in the day. You're always going on about reserve team football, and what's the situation with under-23 development football. John, I used to watch the reserves home and away, and John was knocking on the door, and I was always sort of we used to pick our probable team, on a Friday in the paper, and I think I put John in once or twice, and Jimmy would ring up and say, what, you want to be the manager, it's like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, never having covered Burnley anywhere near like either of you guys did. I've not got any stories about that really. Although my dad did used to contribute to a thing in the Telegraph, which was like, I think it was called Terry's Talk or something like that, and it was like 3 Burnley fans on a Tuesday or giving their opinion, sort of like a podcast type thing, except in a written format. Really, it was like fans, giving their own little mini columns. And my dad did it for a couple of seasons when Cottrell was manager, and I'll not mention the player, but he sort of ridiculed a player. My dad had a sort of sarcastic sort of style, and he sort of mocked one of these players, and he did it a couple of times. And then he got a phone call from probably the same person you're talking about, Ange, and he was invited down to meet Cottrell, who said to him, I've been reading your column, and I notice you keep making these comments about this player. Do you realise what's going on in his personal life? And went into quite a lot of detail and said, this is not for publication, but this is just so you know that the bloke you're taking the piss out of every week is going through this in his life. And I always think back to that because one of the complaints you get, I've not had much from managers because I've never really covered one particular team that closely, apart from a couple of really big ones where, you're not going to get Carlo Ancelotti ringing up the Reuters correspondent to question your match report. It's just not going to happen. But you do get press officers doing it. But the one thing I've often said to press officers when they ring up and say, see, you don't know what's going on in the background, that really upsets somebody, or you got that one wrong because you don't know. I said, well, no, we don't know. No, because you haven't told us. Yeah. Or you don't give us access to that information. So that's always a good defence for journalists as well. But I thought Steve Cottrell was a really good example of that, because my dad probably wouldn't have written that stuff he certainly wouldn't have written that stuff if he'd have known it. And that's probably quite good management from Cottrell. And the thing as well that I will say is, and you hear a lot of quite negative stuff about Steve Cottrell's management style at times from people, but when my dad was quite seriously ill, he got a card at Burnley General Hospital popped up personally signed with best wishes from Steve Cottrell, which I've never forgotten about either. So when I hear people sort of slag Cottrell off, I often think of that really, but I'm sure people have had other experiences. But it's interesting, isn't it? I think to give people a little bit of an insight into what it's like as a beat reporter covering the team. I mean, one thing people often say, Chris, like when you read the message boards and some of the stick that you've had a bit over the years, people will say like, oh, they can't upset the club, and I know that's something that's always bugged you a bit, that, because you obviously have upset the club.
Well, yeah. I say you're not in tandem with them, Like I say, when you're nowhere near as sort of close as people might consider, and unfortunately, I mean that relationship seems to have sort of faded away somewhat, even more so. But it is. That's how Stan famously. Was it they played an FA Cup tie at Mansfield in 2004? And I went to the tunnel after the game, and he just went, you can effing get effed. And I'm looking at just incredulous. I was like, what have I done? You know what you've effing done. Just F off. And I was banned for the remainder of that season from press conferences. And Scott Reed, who was at 2BR then, he used to give me the audio so I could at least get some quotes. And Stan found that out and went absolutely apoplectic, and that there was a stop put to that. But I to this day, I think I'd written a piece saying I think Burnley had won something like 11 games over the previous calendar year, and it'd been a poor year. And I don't think that was a popular. I don't think the facts were popular, shall we say, the way they were presented. But to me, the day he left the club, he rang me up and he said, "Only business, nothing personal. Do you want to come round and make me tea?"
Really?
Yeah. And just absolutely, like I say, I had the utmost respect for him, and he was absolutely. You'd never learn as much off another football manager in your life, but he was, I popped up there and had my tea, and I stopped for a few hours, and told me some stories that unfortunately I couldn't print, but it's that's the way it is, yeah.
I mean, Greavesy, like this, just before we wrap this up, I mean, you deal with young journalists as well. I mean, they're going into those environments when they get jobs. If you're covering the big teams, Pep's not ringing you up, Klopp's not ringing you up. It's a press office who rings you up, isn't it? And is that part of their training, being able to handle those awkward phone calls you get?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot around interviews and difficult interviews and things like that, because it is part and parcel. But I completely agree with Chris on Stan. I've known him for quite a while, and he's an absolute joy to kind of be around and learn from. But talking of banned, Brian Laws wanted me to. I think he wanted me banned from Burnley. I mean, the official one was he wants to ban you from Turf Moor. And again, Darren Bentley just said, stay away from press conferences, basically. By that point, I'd kind of had enough anyway. And it was after the game we'd got smashed by Man City, which should have been called off second half. But I think City were 5-0 up at that point, and torrential rain made the pitch unplayable. And Laws basically said to the fourth official, you can't call this off. There'll be a riot if you called it off at 5-0. And I always remember Stephen Fletcher being announced as the man of the match because he'd got the consolation goals, and the City fans singing "There's only one Stephen Fletcher." So on the Monday we did a big time to go, Brian. But Brian didn't have the kind of didn't call me up in the same way as Coyle. But yeah, absolutely. Just dealing with press officers who again can be quite awkward with journalists, as we all know, and that's the kind of angry phone call you get. All the managers not happy, but I miss the times when the jeopardy was the manager might ring you up, and I had a column, so I wasn't going to press conferences. I'd hang around after the game to listen to the managers. But yeah, I think young reporters nowadays, especially if you're covering big clubs, probably don't have the kind of experience of being told off by a manager. And just before we go, I did once have I had a trainee who we used to send out to football matches, a guy called Colin Henrys, I should say, and he was once mugged in the park next to Deepdale because Graham Wesley, when he was Preston manager, had kept the press waiting for about an hour and 3/4, and by the time Colin was walking back across Avenham Park or whatever the park is near Deepdale Park probably, he actually got mugged. Moore Park, there we go. He actually got mugged because it was that late at night that he was walking across the park on his own and got mugged. So but Wesley was quite well known for that, I think. Not a lot of people have a good word to say about Graham Wesley. But he used to famously keep the journalists waiting in the press room for an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, come in, say very little, then bugger off. But yeah, Colin, unfortunately, as a student journalist, he used to go out for our sports agency at the time, Sportsbeat, covering stuff for the league paper. And he actually got mugged on a Tuesday night in Moore Park because of Graham Wesley.
Yeah,
but you just don't get that experience anymore, do you? I mean, that's the stuff that makes you. And Colin still works in sport. He was at Wrexham doing some stuff down at Wrexham last time I spoke to Colin. So, in the big league now with the two American actors.
Yeah, what a story that is. Yeah, well, I'll save my story about being mugged outside the San Siro after a Champions League game press conference for another time. But let's finish off with let's just have a quick predictions for Monday night. What do we expect, Chris?
Oh, good grief!
It's a mugs game, I know, but go on.
Yeah, famously hopeless at predictions. I'd like to think that Burnley can go there and pick up at least a point, and I'd take a one apiece.
One apiece for Chris Borden. Greavesy?
Yeah, I was thinking one apiece. I'd take a point, get a point on the board, get us off the mark. See how results have gone Saturday, Sunday. But yeah, maybe nick it. But head says 1-1, same as Chris, I think.
Shock 2-1 victory for me.
It's uncharacteristically popular. Uncharacteristically
positive.
Not the right positive. There we go. Couldn't even get that out. I was so shocked from you there, Simon. But I think every Burnley fan in the land would take a shock 2-1 late
winner from Lyle Foster.
Oof.
Yeah.
I've been running a long straight line from his own area.
Hey, we're going to keep that going all season, aren't we? Right. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's been a good chat. Hopefully, that little bit of insight into what it was like for Chris covering Burnley is of interest. And we will be back with a special edition on Tuesday after Monday night's match, looking back at how it all went. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media at BHole Podcast on Twitter, X, Facebook, wherever you want. And don't forget, of course, when you subscribe to our podcast feed, try to leave us a rating and a review if possible. It does help other people find us, helps get us up that chart so we can finish a little bit higher every week in those charts and more people find us. And who knows, one day we might even be able to get some advertising to pay our internet bills. So all the best. Cheers. Enjoy this weekend. Enjoy Monday night's game and speak to you all on Tuesday.